In my mind, I'm going to Carolina. Welcome back to United Taste of America, our podcast series, and welcome to the 12th state in the Union, North Carolina, the Tar Heel State. I am Rick K. Jones, and I'm glad you've chosen to join us today. North Carolina was originally settled by Englishmen on the Outer Bank island of Roanoke Island, believe it or not, in 1585. And that colony was funded by Sir Walter Raleigh. They left the colonists and they went back to England to get supplies. And when they came back, it was gone. Everybody was gone. The whole colony had vanished. They call it the Lost Colony. The first English person born in America was born there. Her name was Virginia Dare, a little girl born in that colony on Roanoke Island. She vanished. Everybody vanished. Nobody knows what happened. If you go to the Outer Banks today, you can go to an outdoor play called The Lost Colony that tells that story. That's pretty amazing. But North Carolina became part of a bigger colony, the Carolinas Colony, with a major land grant given to those 8 Lord Proprietors in 1629. We talked about earlier about the great state of South Carolina. Well, North and South Carolina were together until 1712. And in 1712, North Carolina split off from South Carolina and became its own colony. Folks, in 1776, before the Declaration of Independence, the first colony to call for independence was in North Carolina. They produced a document called the Halifax Resolves. It was a resolution that's much like our Declaration of Independence. It said, we need to leave England. We declare ourselves an independent country. That area in northeastern part of North Carolina is full of all kinds of Revolutionary War sites, Bath and Washington and Halifax and all that. A great area there. North Carolina prospered because of what? Slaves and tobacco. Okay. This is a huge tobacco state. Remember, Virginia was settled as a tobacco state, and then they realized they could grow tobacco in North Carolina, and it became the cash crop, again, largely on the backs of enslaved African peoples. And because of that, North Carolina was one of the states that seceded from the Union in 1861 to join the Confederate States of America. Well, after the war, tobacco remained a huge part of the economy, and there were 2 major tobacco companies in North Carolina, the Duke Tobacco Company and R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. And they're interesting stories, and that they both funded major universities that you've heard of. So there was a little Methodist school in Durham, North Carolina, called Trinity College. And the Duke tobacco people gave them so much money that they changed the name of the university to Duke University. Well, the other tobacco company was jealous. That was R.J. Reynolds, Richard Joshua Reynolds, and they wanted a school of their own. Well, there was a teeny little Baptist school north of Raleigh in a little tiny town called Wake Forest. And R.J. Reynolds told them, if you'll move your campus to Winston-Salem, where we're headquartered, we'll pay for it all. And they did. And so Wake Forest University is not in Wake Forest, North Carolina. It is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and it literally is next to what was R.J. Reynolds' homestead, his house, and near the tobacco factories of Winston-Salem. North Carolina, like so many other southern states we've talked about, was a textile hub. Lots and lots of textile mills throughout North Carolina. And they also became a furniture hub. Around the High Point area of North Carolina, they make some of the great furniture, and they have great furniture factories. And it really came a lot from those Moravians that settled in North Carolina. And we're going to talk a minute about them as we go along. But the Moravians were a people that originally were from the Wachau Valley in what is now Austria, okay, on the Danube. Wachau Valley, Moravians, they were Protestants. Because of religious persecution, boy, this has happened a lot, they moved into an area of what is now Czechoslovakia. And then they came to the New World and settled in Pennsylvania, in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And so there was this huge Moravian colony in Pennsylvania. And they pooled their money and they bought a huge tract of land from the proprietors in South Carolina. And they walked from Pennsylvania to Winston-Salem. And they created a town called Old Salem. And we'll talk a little bit about Old Salem in a few minutes. But they were renowned as furniture makers. And so they made classic furniture that in many cases we call it classic American furniture. And then in that area of High Point, which is not far from there, Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem are kind of in a similar area. It became the furniture capital of America in a lot of ways. And today they still have a big furniture mart, and you can go and if you own a furniture store and order and buy furniture there. It's really not open to the public. It's open to the retailers that sell furniture. North Carolina was the state where we learned to fly. A couple of boys from Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright, came to the Outer Banks and knew that the flat area and the wind would all help. And the first flight was there at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, in the Outer Banks. Our nation's first research park was started in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. The famous rivalry between North Carolina and Duke, they're only 8 miles apart, the two schools. So they know each other and play. And, you know, Duke's kind of is a private, conservative, maybe Republican school. New York's the public state university, a little bit more liberal. It's really makes for a great rivalry from that standpoint. North Carolina also played a huge role in desegregation. Around Greensboro, they had the famous Greensboro sit-ins. There was a Woolworth's store that would not serve blacks. And black students from North Carolina A&T came and did a sit-in. They wouldn't leave. They sat on the floor, wouldn't leave, got arrested, came back, got arrested, came back, ultimately led to that particular establishment and a lot of places in North Carolina being desegregated. Today, North Carolina is a combination of agriculture, like fruit trees or cucumbers to make pickles. It's the largest growers of sweet potatoes in America, but it's really known as a banking center, other industries, and a lot of research in those research triangle areas from that standpoint. The great state of North Carolina. There are lots of iconic foods in North Carolina. They have a very large coastline. So you think about North Carolina, kind of a rectangle-shaped state that runs from the Atlantic Ocean to the Appalachian Mountains. And so you've got every kind of cuisine reflective of those different areas. The coastline produces a thing called calabash-style seafood. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But they also catch shrimp, oysters, and a lot of bluefish, a lot of tuna. You may have tuned in to one of the television shows called Wicked Tuna. It's out of North Carolina, out of the Outer Banks, and they catch a lot of tuna, a lot of flounder, a lot of other big sport fish in North Carolina. In the mountain area, they've got brook trout, rainbow trout, brown trout. North Carolina, interestingly, has a lot of hot dog stands throughout the state, some famous hot dog stands. As I've mentioned to you before, I have a newsletter, On the Road with Rick, and our February edition of that talked about some of the great hot dog stands across the country, and a lot of them are in the state of North Carolina. They're famous for fried chicken. It's the home of Bojangles. Bojangles is a very famous regional fried chicken chain that is headquartered in North Carolina. We talked about North Carolina. They grow more sweet potatoes than any other state in the union, and so you can get sweet potato pies, sweet potato casseroles, sweet potato biscuits, sweet potatoes pretty much every way. We talked about the cucumbers. Mount Olive Pickles, founded as a co-op, farm co-op, 1926, still is a co-op. Still privately, independently owned pickle company, largest independent pickle company in America, Mount Olive Pickles. There's a famous sauce called Texas Pete. Ain't made in Texas. It's made by the Garner Food Company in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. When they made their hot sauce, they felt like people would think it would be more hot if they thought it came from Texas. And so they called it what? Texas Pete. North Carolina is the home of Krispy Kreme donuts. It's a great story. There was a man named Vernon Rudolph in the 1930s who was working in New Orleans. And from a French pastry chef, he learned to make donuts. Now, it's 1937. What's going on in 1930s? The Depression. Not many people had money for donuts. He decides he's going to open a donut shop, but he's got to go someplace where people actually have what? Money, disposable income. So he opens his donut shop in Old Salem, across the river from what? The great tobacco plants of R.J. Reynolds. Even in the Depression, people were smoking like chimneys. And they had 3 shifts going on making cigarettes. And those people had what? Disposable income to buy donuts. And so the first Krispy Kreme donuts, the first stand was in Old Salem. And today, for years, it was headquartered in Winston-Salem. They've moved their headquarters to Charlotte recently. Krispy Kreme donuts. In Old Salem, the Moravians that came there, they made 2 phenomenal desserts. They made Moravian sugar cake and Moravian sugar cookies. And when you go to Old Salem today, and again, at one time, the city of Winston was across the river from the city of Salem. Today, it's one city called Winston-Salem. But if you go to Old Salem, you can buy their famous Moravian sugar cake and sugar cookies. They're unbelievable. I mentioned the Moravians came from where originally? The Wachau Valley. Well, the Moravians also started a bank when they got to Winston-Salem. That bank was called what? Wachovia. Wachovia is now part of Wells Fargo, but originally it was founded by business people of the Moravian faith from Salem, North Carolina. North Carolina is famous for 2 soft drinks. They invented Pepsi in New Bern in 1893. A lot of people think Pepsi's from New York. Well, they're headquartered in New York, but it was created by a pharmacist in New Bern on the coast in 1893. Today, they also have a very famous soft drink called Cheerwine. Cheerwine was founded in 1917 in Salisbury, North Carolina. It is a wild cherry flavored. It's a wonderful deal. And a lot of people cook with Cheerwine because you make cakes and different desserts with Cheerwine. Really interesting thing. So a lot of great dishes from North Carolina. But when you think about North Carolina, what do you really think about? You know what you think about. You think about barbecue. And there are 2 styles of barbecue in North Carolina, and they're fighting words. People prefer one or the other, and they'll fight you over what is really North Carolina and what is really the best. The first one is Eastern whole hog pulled pork barbecue. And this, it's really interesting when you think about barbecue. This was largely English settlers in the eastern part of North Carolina, or some of the Scotch-Irish, but mostly eastern English settlers. Well, there were no hogs in America. When they got here, when Columbus got here, there were no hogs. but he brought hogs on his ships. And the Spanish let all the hogs escape, and hogs can reproduce in a hurry. And so suddenly, throughout the South and up and down the eastern seaboard were wild boars everywhere. And so they would catch a wild pig and cook the whole pig on a pit. Now, a lot of people feel like the Spaniards did a lot of cooking of pigs on open grilled areas. Go to Spain today, you can eat a lot of pork, pigs, but they really believe they learned how to do large game, large animal barbecue from the Native Americans, who had been for decades cooking venison and bear and other large game as part of their diet. But anyway, they ended up doing that. Now, the only ingredients they use are vinegar and pepper. And the vinegar is basically apple cider vinegar because there were wild apples growing in North Carolina. And so they could create the apple vinegar from what was actually growing there. When you see whole hog barbecue, you see them with a giant mop that they'll use the mop to spread the vinegar and the spices on, and that kind of thing flavors the meat. But then there's another kind of barbecue in North Carolina. It's either called Western style barbecue versus the Eastern style, or many people call it Lexington style barbecue. Lexington is a little town in the middle of North Carolina, and this is where they have barbecue that they added tomatoes to it. So it's added a little bit of a tomato sauce to it. And they don't do whole hogs. They do pork shoulders, which we call butts. So a Boston butt is the shoulder of a pig. And they're able to kind of control the temperature and control the quality of that differently than they do with a whole hog process. Which one do I like the best? Both. What can I tell you? Now, if I had to choose, I'm a vinegar guy. And so I love Eastern, but let me tell you, Lexington style is pretty darn good too. Eastern North Carolina, whole hog barbecue, vinegar, peppers, cooked on all wood. They cook wood in a chimney, basically, get the ashes, the hot coals, shove it in, and then they cook the whole hog. They turn it over. It's on a thing that they flip. When you go see our vignette about whole hog barbecue, you'll be able to see the entire process. Because in my opinion, nobody does whole hog barbecue better than the great Sam Jones. Sam Jones comes from a barbecue family. His grandfather and his father ran a barbecue restaurant, the very famous Skylight Inn in Ayden, North Carolina. But Sam has his own place called Sam Jones BBQ in Winterville, not far from Ayden, not far from Greenville, North Carolina. This is the book Sam gave me when we spent the day with him, Sam Jones Whole Hog Barbecue. Tells you the history of barbecue in the state of North Carolina, and has amazing recipes, barbecue sides. You got to get this book. If you love barbecue, this is one of the Bibles to do that. Sam's grandfather, Pete, and before that, his uncle, Emmett Dennis, who taught Pete. They've been in the barbecue business for a long, long, long time. So he's the third generation of Joneses to own a barbecue restaurant. He is a James Beard Award-winning pitmaster. He goes out on the road and cooks a lot at benefits and food festivals and all this. But like I said, he opened Sam Jones BBQ in 2015, and that's where we went. Now, a lot of people have filmed his barbecue. And when we got there, we said, listen, we want to see the whole process. And we said, what time do we need to be here to see this? And they said, you need to be here at 4 a.m. And we said, okay, we'll see you. And they rolled their eyes like, no, we've seen all these other film crews, and they rolled in here about 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, at 3:15, we were in the parking lot. And they pulled up, and we're like, oh, my goodness, these guys are serious. We had to get there early because what they got to do first? Build a fire. They got to build a fire so they can get the hot coals, the ash. Then they got to put the whole dressed pig on the pit. It takes a long process to be able to do that. We wanted to be able to see it all. And so we were there, and we watched them light the wood fire. They use mostly white oak, which grows, throughout that part of North Carolina. They do use some hickory, mostly white oak. When you go to Texas barbecue, and when we talk about Texas, we're going to talk about barbecue a lot. They cook on mesquite. Why? Because that's what they have. Mesquite grows and it grows and it grows, and you can use it. Well, in eastern North Carolina, it's all about the oak. They cook the oak in a chimney, okay, in a separate chimney, and then as it burns, they shovel the hot coals into the pit and cook the whole pig. First, skin side up, damp it with water heavily, keeping it moist, putting a lot of spice on it, a lot of vinegar, a lot of salt, mop it with the vinegar and the spices, and then you flip the whole hog and crisp up the skin. Then you split it in half, then into quarters. You chop the meat up, so you use meat from all parts of the pig. So when you get whole hog barbecue, it's not just pork shoulder or leg or belly. It's a combination of all of those. And then you put more vinegar, more pepper sauce, and it's really a great way to do it. Sam Jones BBQ, the sides were amazing. I mean, he brought out everything, smoked turkey, barbecued ribs, pulled pork, brisket. But for me, it's the whole hog barbecue. It's the chopped pork that comes from the whole hog that's perfect with potato salad and coleslaw and baked beans and fried okra and macaroni and cheese. Yeah, all that. Yeah. And, eat some cornbread with it too. It was one of the best meals ever in my life. Like ever. We had a cousin, Will Ogletree, who happened to be working in the area when Ryan and I were filming that day, and we invited him to join us for lunch. And there was so much food, he got to take it back to Charleston with him, and I think he ate on it for about a month. That's how much food they gave us that day. Sam Jones is one of the most genuine people I know. We had a great interview. I think you'll love it in our vignette series you can find on YouTube. Just was a great day. Whole hog Eastern style barbecue, Sam Jones BBQ, Winterville, North Carolina. But there's so much more to North Carolina than just barbecue. So here are my 3 from me suggestions. We talked about seafood, and we talked about a style of seafood in North Carolina called calabash style. Well, there's a little town just north of the South Carolina line. When you first come into North Carolina, there's a little tiny town called Calabash, and that little tiny town has about a dozen seafood restaurants, and they're all incredible. And they serve this style of seafood called calabash style seafood. It is a very, very light, crunchy batter that they fry shrimp, fish, oysters, scallops, clams, all in this crunchy batter. And so you can't go wrong at pretty much any restaurant in Calabash, but I'm partial to a place called the Calabash Seafood Hut. No frills, just amazing, and I mean amazing, fried seafood. Calabash style, Calabash Seafood Hut, Calabash, North Carolina. My second restaurant is in Winston-Salem. I spent a lot of time in Winston-Salem over the years because we worked for the Sara Lee Company, and Sara Lee's knit products division was based in Winston-Salem. And so that was Hanes, Champion, Legs Pantyhose, Playtex. They made all that. Again, we talked about North Carolina being mill towns. Well, they made T-shirts, and they made pantyhose, and they made sweatshirts, all in that area. And so I was back and forth to Winston-Salem a lot. I'd been there, obviously, back and forth because of the basketball business that I was in early in my career, too. There's a very famous old-style steakhouse in Winston-Salem called Ryan's. Folks, it's tremendous. It's one of the best steakhouses ever. For me, it's just got great nostalgia. I had a dear friend, Don Schimmel, the late Don Schimmel, who worked with me for years. He ran our Share Lee business. He had worked originally in the tobacco business for Liggett Brothers Tobacco, later for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco. Ryan's was his go-to place. And the guy who was the president of Sara Lee Knit Products at the time when we were working for him was a guy named Kirk Bowden, another great guy, and that's where we would go. That was our get a nice Cabernet, get a great steak. Ryan's Steakhouse, it's still, y'all, really, really good. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Then here's a chain. You say, Rick, you're not going to recommend a chain restaurant to us. Yes, I am. Because there's this very special chain restaurant just in North Carolina. Well, was historically just in North Carolina. They've just opened a couple of stores in South Carolina, and I think one new store in Virginia. So they're going to take over the world. It's called Biscuitville. All they do is biscuits. That's it. 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Not open at night. Just breakfast. Just biscuits. Ham biscuits, steak biscuits, chicken biscuits, biscuits with honey, egg biscuits. What makes it different? They make the biscuits from scratch in front of you. They have plexiglass. So while you're ordering your biscuits over here, you're watching this lady over here actually make the biscuits and cut them up and pop them in the oven. So between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m., you're getting just made hot biscuits out of the oven. Biscuitville, throughout the state of North Carolina, you got to have it. Really, really good. Again, I mentioned my newsletter. For more great places to eat in North and South Carolina, you need to get the January issue of On the Road with Rick, because it was all about foods from the Carolinas. Y'all, we got an amazing playlist in North Carolina. Some great, great music came out of North Carolina. One of my favorite songs of all time is from a native North Carolinian, James Taylor. James Taylor's daddy ran the medical school at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. He wrote and recorded a wonderful song called Carolina in My Mind. In my mind, I'm going to Carolina. Originally, the song was made famous by Old Crow Medicine Show, later covered by Darius Rucker. It's just the Darius Rucker version of Wagon Wheel. Then the song that we all sing, Sweet Caroline, bum, 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 Neil Diamond's famous song, Sweet Caroline. They sing it at Davidson College and other places. This is a lot of bluegrass music came out of North Carolina, from the hills, the mountain people. Doc Watson, Doc and Merle were from North Carolina. This is the song Southbound. And last, the great Eric Church wrote a wonderful song called Carolina. So, my friends, that's a wrap on one of my favorite food states, North Carolina. We will see you next week from the last of the 13 original colonies. That's Rhode Island on United Taste of America.